can accept it. And let's get Craig on board. Listen, Craig has done this a few times already, and he's gonna do it again. And I think we all know him in this room, and we know he's really good at speaking, and he's speaking right across the country, right across the U.S., and then he's gonna move into Europe and some other countries later on. So let's welcome Craig Colby. Tell us a little about yourself, and then jump into your presentation, please.
Yeah, my name's Craig Colby. I'm a television producer and executive producer. And in the last 5, 6 years or so, I've been helping institutions and other people with their video production. I got it. Listening. Let's talk about listening. I listened to everything you guys had to say, and a lot of it's pretty common. Joe, the idea that your mind is racing while you're listening to people, that's very common. We all do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Cutting off people Sarah talked about that a little bit. So did Maureen. That's kind of natural, and it's something you have to fight against. I still do it. Even though I'm aware of it, I still do it. And once you do it, once you're aware of it, then you can say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please go on." Right? That helps. And these are listening is a skill. And in my interviewing seminar, which this is not, I start with talking about the different types of listeners I've encountered. There's one that I call the me turn, and that's as soon as you tell somebody something, they start going, "Oh yeah, well listen, this happened to me," and all of a sudden they're talking about themselves, right? And that's really difficult, especially if you're in a time when you really need to talk to somebody and you end up talking about them. The other one, listening thing, is the egg timer. There are certain people that have a natural timer in their head. They can only listen so long before they have to talk. I have a bit of an egg timer that I've been largely able to overcome. But I have a colleague I was working with who I think is terrific. He had a 30-second egg timer. So I knew I had to get things out in 30 seconds to let him talk, because that's just the way he operated. There's one that's not in my presentation. I have to add it. I call it the railroader. And that's somebody who will not necessarily turn to themselves, but when you're talking about something, they have to introduce a topic that they're saying, and it just railroads the conversation. So there are a lot of bad listeners out there. Most people are bad listeners. There are certain professions that breed good listeners. Social workers are excellent listeners. They are used to listening all the time. Lawyers are good listeners. I find that a lot of salespeople, the successful ones, are good listeners because that's how they do it. Dave tells a story about how he was the most successful salesperson in his group where he was. And it's because he would go on Friday afternoon to a guy who was overwhelmed and listen to the guy and listen to what his problems are and solve them. While all his colleagues were heading off to the cottage, Dave was listening to somebody's problems and figuring out a way to solve them. Fortunately, in my profession, I've had to interview a lot of people, and I realized pretty early on that I loved hearing people's stories and getting insights into their lives. And when somebody starts talking about something, especially something they're passionate about, I want to hear more. There's a group that I belong to that has Friday morning founder walks for people who own businesses. People in that group have responded to me very well. And I think it's because when they start talking about their business, I keep asking questions because I want to hear it all. I want to know it all. I want to understand it all. I'm fascinated by it. I still talk too much. I still have listening issues, but I'm better at it than most. So I'm going to get into the presentation now. It's not too long. And here's the goal of this presentation. I'm going to give you a little evidence for what I'm saying, so you have to take my word for it. But at the end, there is going to be a slide that has a methodology that will help you professionally and personally, because the listening skills that I have transferred to my personal life and made my personal life better. It's the most useful transferable skill I have. And we are living in a world that doesn't seem to value listening. They value the hot take and what you're saying. And certainly, speaking, who was talking about speaking to groups? Was that Michelle? That in her coaching she had to speak. Speaking is
I
really
think
important.
so. I think
That's
that
the
was
other end of
Michelle.
yeah, that's the other end of communication. Like communication is a two-way street. Sorry, I got a little frog in my throat. But I think best communication always starts with listening, and we're going to talk about why in a minute. So let me start sharing my presentation here. And if you have any questions, I won't see your hands, so just jump in. Okay. All right. Can you all see this slide presentation right now?
That's a
Everybody sees the
yes.
slide?
Yes.
Oh, where do I go to the slideshow?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, slideshow. Here we go. So lead by listening. There's a lot of different things you can do with listening, but this is a leadership listening bit. And it's primarily designed for people who have employees or even clients to do a better job of leading people with your ears. Most people think that, or not most people, I don't know. A lot of people think that leading is big speeches and getting people to your vision. I would completely disagree with that. I think that's part of it, but I think really you have to lead by listening. And I'm going to talk about my chops in each of them later, but I want to tell you what we're doing today. I'm going to support my claims with research. I've already said that. A 7-step process you can implement immediately. And again, it'll improve business and personal relationships when you use it. I'm going to start with a little story of my own. This is a bit of a hook attention grabber. In the year 2000, I was producing a series called The Sex Files for Discovery Channel. It was about the science of sex and it was a bit groundbreaking in that it treated sex as if it was not a taboo subject, and we showed things on air that you wouldn't ordinarily see in television at the time. It was also my big break. The woman who produced season 1 was pregnant and off to have her baby. I'll let you draw your own conclusions from the timing of that. But this was my big break. It was the highest rated show in the history of the channel. And I negotiated a salary. I gave them a range and they gave me the bottom range, and I would get to the top range as a bonus if I beat the ratings from the first season. Again, the highest rated series in the history of the channel. All I had to do was beat the highest rated series in the history of the channel to get that money and to, establish myself. And quite frankly, I've always felt if you put me on even ground, I can outproduce anybody. That's just my own little ego there. So there's a situation. By the way, this is a little storytelling structure you can use called SOAR: situation, obstacles, actions, results. I'm going to use it here. Some people have heard me talk about that before. So season 1 was the highest rated show in the channel's history. I was doing season 2. I would get a bonus if I beat season 1's numbers. Here are the obstacles. We had 7 months to deliver a 13 episode on 1 hour special. Usually you have 9 months to a year to do 13 episodes. So things were stacked, not stacked against me, but it was already a challenge. I had a small team. I started out with myself and an associate producer. Later, I would hire a camera person and an editor. And I believe at that point, I had a writer coming on to help. The associate producer, my right-hand person, quit for a promotion on another show. She was going to Canada AM. We were in the middle of production. We were in the middle of shooting and had just started editing. This was the person who knew everything that I knew and the person I relied on most. But when somebody has a chance to improve their career, their own personal life, you've got to support them. And I did. But that was a challenge. Our cameraman, who was not somebody I chose, but was on season 1, he had a lot of problems. Among them, he hit a light pole on a shoot and fled the scene of the accident, among other things. I had to fire him later. And also, once the show was on the air, it was pulled off the air when a father in Calgary sat his daughters, a divorced father in Calgary, sat his daughters in front of the television at 8 o'clock at night and put on something he thought was safe, which was Discovery Channel, while he made dinner. Of course, it was 10 o'clock Eastern when we aired the show, and the show that conformed to CRTC requirements. We were in the clear, but that was during the rear end show. And those poor young girls saw something they should never have seen. And that father phoned the CRTC and he phoned the newspaper and he phoned us, and our show was pulled off the air. So that was everything going wrong. Those are the obstacles we had. So what were my actions to overcome the problems? I wrote and directed 7 of the 13 episodes and the 1 hour special. I had the writer write the other 6 half hours, and I hired a producer director to go and shoot them and take them through the edit suite. Because our teams were small, I hired smart, hardworking people. I gave them clear directions and checked in with them regularly. I realized I couldn't do it all myself, so I had to trust them. With that group, I praised their work publicly and I gave them a chance to grow. So I looked after their growth and I worked them and myself 7 days a week. I don't know how many people have, well, there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, of course, who work 7 days a week, but that's a hard grind to ask other people to do it. It's one thing when you do it for yourself for your big thing, but to ask other people to do it, that's a big ask. So what were the results? The 1 hour special was the highest rated Canadian program to that point in the channel's history, the fifth highest rated show of any kind. We got beat by Walking with Dinosaurs, which was the first time the graphics were available to make a realistic dinosaur nature programming, going down to the Titanic, going to the top of Everest. Season two's numbers were 30% higher than season one. So we didn't just beat season one's numbers, we blew them out of the water. It was a breakout season in terms of international sales. And one of the buyers from Quebec told me season two was editorially superior to season one. Those were big accomplishments for me, but that wasn't the biggest that wasn't the biggest reward for me in this. I am a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. It's not a secret. And I'm a big sports fan. I used to work at TSN. It's no secret where my allegiances lie to the people who work with me. But that team that I worked 7 days a week gave me this gift. They found out my favorite team. They bought an official jersey. This is the kind the players wear in the field. And they got my nickname from TSN and my high school number and put it on the back. Like, that's a very, very thoughtful gift from a group of people that you work 7 days a week. So what did I got the results and I got the loyalty of my crew and appreciation of my crew. How did I do that? I let them complain. I did a lot of things right, as you can see. I praised them, I gave them opportunities, but I think one of the biggest things I did is I let them complain. How many people like to hear people complain? Yeah, I see Joe, but here's the thing about complaining. People are going to complain, and if they're not complaining to you, they're complaining about you. So if you're in a leadership position, you want people to complain to you because it means they think you're going to help them, right? I let them complain. I listened to every problem and then I solved them. But I would never be able to solve their problems if I didn't listen to them. For example, with the camera operator, I didn't know the extent of the problems until the crew talked to me about it. So listening to people complain may not seem like a pleasant task, but it's also a selfless task and it shows the importance of listening. I led by listening. So let's talk about leadership. What does this dude know about leadership? That's me when I was 16 years old, maybe 17 at that point. And this is athletic leadership camp at Lake Couchiching in Ontario. And one person from every high school class is selected to go to this athletic leadership camp. I never thought of myself as the best athlete, but I was selected to go. My brothers were selected to go. I learned a lot about leadership there. So here's some leadership chops. In high school, I was captain of the football and soccer team. I was vice president of the student council, won the Rotary Citizenship Award. I was class valedictorian. I went to Ontario Athletic Leadership Camp. All of those things, well, the awards were not necessary. Those were recognitions of leadership, not training. But all the other things came with leadership training and experience. So I've been in leadership roles and had leadership training from a very early age. At university, I was a resident assistant. That means I lived in a resident and I was in charge of a floor. And if there were any problems, I would have to deal with it. I would have to discipline my classmates, which was never fun. But again, a leadership role. And in my work, I've been a series producer, leadership, executive producer, leadership, director of production, leadership. So been in a lot of leadership roles. So I have experience in training in that. Also, as a volunteer, I've been a hockey and basketball coach, leading young kids, and I've been the vice president of House League at East York Baseball Association. That means I've run House League for 9 years. That's 750 kids, 1,500 parents. Again, dealing with problems all the time. And I can tell you some listening stories there if we have time later. So what does this dude know about listening? That's me with the Raptor on a shoot. This was the shoot that Dave Berger showed up at later in the day. The Raptor was there earlier. And I'm listening to the Raptor, and one of the things he told me He said, if anybody knew what I was doing in this suit, no one would love me. Pretty funny stuff. So what do I know about listening? University level journalism courses where you are trained in interviewing. I was also trained by a gentleman named John Sawatsky. He was part of the journalism program at Carleton. He trained people, students, to go out and do interviews for a book he was writing on Brian Mulrooney. He's trained almost everyone at the CBC, and he was hired by ESPN to train all of those people. He gave me a lot of the basics in interviewing, and the interviewing seminar I teach has a lot of his information, plus a lot of the things that I've learned. So I think it's fair to say that I have a lot of experience in leadership and a lot of experience in listening. Am I an expert at both? Yeah, I would say so. And I can tell you from experience in both that the Venn diagram of leadership and listening is almost completely overlapping. Leadership is listening. And I'm going to talk to you about that right now. So what is leadership? Leadership is not bossing people around. It's getting the best performance out of others. Ideally, they want to do it for you. They're not forced to do it. They want to do it for you. The best leaders I've had, my biggest fear was letting them down. And the values you have as a leader are prioritizing their needs. My dad was in the military, and he always used to say that the troops eat first. That's a nice little phrase to remember. The troops eat first. If you put them before you, they will go to battle for you. So prioritizing their needs makes you a good leader. Making sure that you are the center of everything does not. Listening. Listening is focusing on what the other person is saying, right? You only inject yourself enough to make them talk more. Again, that is prioritizing their needs. If you have something to say, it's waiting till after they are finished fully expressing themselves, or interjecting it and then bringing the conversation back to them, showing how what you are saying pertains to what they are doing. As you can see, those are things. So I'm going to prove the connection there, that the values there. Let's prove these connections. What makes somebody happy at work? This is a study that I learned in university in my business administration class. It's a very famous study, Frederick Herzberg's two-factor theory of motivation. They had a huge study years and years about what motivates people at work. It's not money. If you don't have enough money, you will be demotivated. But once you have enough to have your needs basically met and you're content, money doesn't motivate you anymore. It is recognition for what you've done, achievement, having a chance to achieve, being given responsibilities, opportunity for growth and advancement, and challenging or meaningful work. When I heard this for the first time and read the study, I boiled it down to this. Three things for me. In other words, they want to be heard. They want to be recognized when they want to achieve, when they achieve something, and they want to grow. To me, those are the three legs of the stool. They want to be heard. They want to be recognized when they achieve something. They want to grow. And to make those things work, you need to listen to everything. They want to be heard. Of course, that's listening, right? And not only listening, but letting them know that you are listening to them. Somebody said the difference between listening and hearing. Yeah, if you're on your phone and they're talking, you're not listening. If you're looking off, well, maybe you are, but you have to let them know you're listening to them. Listen to what they say. They want to be recognized when they achieve. You have to listen and be aware of what they do. You have to listen to what they've done. Sometimes you're listening with your eyes too, right? Watching what they're doing. So in order to recognize the achievement, you have to be aware of what they do. You have to listen to them. And they want to grow. You have to listen to what they want to do to give them the opportunities to grow. Because you may be asking them to do something that they haven't done before at work and would be good for them, but it may not be the growth they want. So to satisfy Frederick Herzberg's two-factor theory of motivation, you got to listen. You can't do it without listening. And if you can do all of that, you make them want to do it for you. And that's been a very common experience in my career. There's one time it wasn't. Somebody remind me that later, the time that I blew it by not listening. There's also a Harvard study of speed daters. Everybody knows what speed dating is, right? Because you've probably done it professionally. But for the social speed dating, you have like 3 to 5 minutes in front of somebody, and you have to know about them enough to make them want to go on a date with you, or see if you want to go on a date with them. People who ask 2 follow-up questions on the first date were far more likely to get a second date. 2 follow-up questions. And the fact they want to go on a date with you is an indication of being liked. So if you ask follow-up questions of somebody, they're going to like you more. And in leadership, you don't necessarily want to be liked, but you certainly want to be respected. You certainly want them to have positive feelings about you. So asking those questions makes a big deal. Also, I read a book called Never Sweat the Small Stuff by Chris Voss. He is a hostage negotiator. The book is on bargaining. He had a little technique called mirroring. If you say the last 3 words your conversation partner says, but if you ask it as a question, that will encourage them to keep talking, and that makes them form a favorable opinion of you. People respond more when you are listening to them and you show you're listening to them. Again, remember I said you had to show you're listening? By repeating those 3 words, and asking a question, you've not only shown that you've listened to them, you have asked them for more. It accomplishes 2 things at once. So listening is very, very important for all of these things. So how do we put this into practice? This is the 7-step thing that I was talking about. This is what I did as an interviewer, and it worked fabulously for me. I can tell you that the number 1 response I had after I interviewed somebody was, wow, that was great. And then they felt like they were a friend of mine, right? A lot of them stayed in touch, really developed good relationships. So step 1 is to establish common ground and build a bond. I would fish around with people to find out what they liked until I found something we had in common, and I would talk about that. Being in sports and knowing about sports has helped a lot. My wife and I have had season tickets to the opera for 25 years. I used to do a lot of work with NASA. In Houston, they have a fantastic opera company. So when I talked to the NASA people, I would often ask about that. And when I found someone who went to the opera, I would talk to them about that for 15 minutes, and then they really liked me, right? So find common ground and build a bond. That is part of making them want to do it for you, right? And making them want to talk to you. One of the things I talk about in interviewing is one of the most important things you can do, even more than questions, is make someone want to talk to you. All right, so you've got the bond, they want to talk to you. When they speak, give them positive reinforcement. When we interview for TV and radio, you can't make any noises because you would interrupt their clip and then you can't use it. So for me, it's nodding, smiling, leaning forward, showing them that, yeah, I really am interested in what you have to say. In a conversation, you can say, yes, that's right. Tell me more. The mirroring, all of those things. Ask open-ended questions, particularly what and how. They encourage people to explain. Now, the difference between open-ended and closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are, did you like that? Was that good? Doesn't mean you can't use them. They're just not as productive in getting people to talk because people can give you a one-word answer. I also find with those closed-ended questions, it's very easy to put a supposition into it, to say something that makes people want to agree with you. Am I guessing right about how you're feeling? Which isn't the same as how are you feeling, right? What and how are big explainer things. What happened? I find I don't mirror so much, but I do say how so when people say something. And how so gets people to explain how this is working for them. What and how. Who is very particular. It's very specific. It's about who. When is kind of the same thing. Why can be intrusive. I know that social workers avoid why, because that can be very parental. Why did you put your hand in the cookie jar? But it also gets people to explain their motivations. As journalists, we have to ask why a lot. I have now started burying my whys deep in my interview. Once people are comfortable and they're happy talking and giving the reinforcement, at the end of interviews, I get into my why questions. And by that point, people are pretty happy to tell you why. And that's where the powerful stuff comes from. So what and how they encourage people to explain. Ask another follow-up question. I'm going to write a book about leadership and listening soon. And one of the things I want to try and put into practice is the 2-question rule. You saw it in the Harvard study, but here's what I would say for the 2-question rule. And here's the experiment I want to run with people. Say you have somebody you have a disagreement with. Start with a disagreement. You have differing opinions on something. Flip a coin. The person who wins gets to listen first. So the other person explains their point of view. The first question is an open-ended question about what they said. You know, how does that work? What does that mean? You know, how did you get this opinion? What does this mean for other people? The second question has to be a follow-up question about what they said in answer to your open-ended question. So at that point, you have had they have had three chances to talk before you've said what you want to say. They are fully explained. Let's see if I got this right. So step 5, summarize what they have said to show you understand. That would be part of the 2-question rule. After they've spoken 3 times, say, it sounds to me like this is what you're saying. I had lunch with my old boss the other day, and he was talking about a marriage counseling session he was in. And they do a type of mirroring where they ask the other person, and then they have to do a summary there. It seems to me you were saying this. And he said that like 3 questions into this, people were crying because they'd never been heard so well. So once you've listened to someone, summarize it. I did this as a journalist to make sure I understood what they were saying was right. And when I went through the interview at the end, I had my own little summary that said, this is what they're saying. And if they agreed to it, that meant I understand it. So after you talk to someone, summarize it, make sure you understand. And then wrap up to ask if there's anything else they want to discuss. I always did this in an interview to make sure I didn't miss something that I didn't see coming. And often they would say, yeah, actually, we really need to talk about this. So if you are completely understanding someone, you've listened to what they have to say, you've established, I'll get that in a second, but ask if there's anything you want to do. And then finally, follow up on what they told you if necessary. Sometimes it's enough to listen. But if you're a boss and someone's told you a problem out there, you either have to fix it or you have to come back and explain the issues associated with that problem, which will either delay fixing it or not fixing it. Although sometimes it's just enough to listen. And I'm going to tell you a story about that. Again, a big sports fan, I'm a big baseball fan. The person on the left is Kirk Gibson. The person on the right is Sparky Anderson. Kirk Gibson was a very talented but volatile player for the Detroit Tigers when they won the World Series in 1984. Sparky Anderson was a very experienced manager. Kirk Gibson, when he became a manager, told a story about a day when he was just stomping around the locker room, mad about something, really angry, and being very public about it. And he said that Sparky Anderson threw open the door and said, "Big boy, get in here." And Gibson went stomping in, and Anderson said, "Tell me about it." So he just went on ranting and raving about whatever was bothering him. At the end of it, Sparky Anderson said, "Is there anything else?" He said, No, that's everything." He said, "All right, get out of here." Kirk Gibson left and he felt better. And Sparky didn't do anything except listen to him. And this is how he managed the most troublesome player on his team. He just made sure that when he had a problem, he was heard. Sometimes it's enough to listen. You will often hear new husbands or new boyfriends complain about talking with their girlfriends or wives that I try to offer them solution to their problems and they're just more mad at me because they don't want you to solve their problems. They want you to listen and support them. Sometimes listening is enough. When you're a leader, you have to decide when you have to listen and when you have to fix. So here is the 7-step process altogether. Find a bond. If you're going to do a screen grab, this is the time. Create a bond so they want to talk to you. Reinforce what they're saying by with nonverbal cues as much as possible. Ask open-ended questions. Ask follow-up questions. Summarize what they've said to make sure that you understand it and to make sure they know you understand it. Wrap up by any more questions and then follow up on what happened. Does anybody need more time to capture this? I'll give you a minute with that. So again, 7 easy steps. You can try this tonight. You can try this today. Like write this down, put it on a Post-it note and stick it on your computer. But this is something you can do right away and it will work. It may take you a while to get comfortable with it, but it will work. Okay, moving on. We can come back to this if you want. So the results of this are increased productivity for the people you're working with. When people are happy and they feel understood and they like their boss, they are less likely to leave. So you have reduced turnover. And the big thing for me is better relationships. I had a high school friend of mine who I don't see very often and doesn't respond very much. We went out for dinner one night and he wanted to ask me one question. He said, "How come you have so many friends?" And the real answer is when people call me, I respond and I show up for people. But a lot of it is when people talk, I listen to them, right? And I'm happy to listen to them. That's what you're going to get out of it. If you think that what I have said could help you or your colleagues or anyone else, this is my contact information. One of the growth areas I'm looking for in my business is I want to speak about this. Like I said, I'm writing a book about it. I will have a speech on this containing a lot of what we're talking about, recorded later in the year. But I'm also looking to go into companies, do this presentation, and then follow up with their managers to teach them how to do this and one-on-one talk about their situations. That's expanding my business because TV ain't doing that great and I want to help people. So I believe that's the whole thing. Does anybody have any questions about that? Thank you for the applause. Here's my first question. It's a close-ended question. Was that helpful?
Yes, it was amazing.
Definitely.
I'm thinking back to, I mean, I taught most of my years in education were with eighth graders. And one of the things I heard over and over and over was I was really hard. I was a lot of fun and I listened to them. And we went through a training very similar to what you had. And I went in thinking that with eighth grade, you just kind of, kicked ass and hope nobody killed anybody that day. And I realized that exactly what you said. When we had this class as teachers where it was, I heard you say, tell me more about that. And I actually did it to prove them wrong. It's like, that's not going to work with a 13-year-old. That's ridiculous. And it worked so well. And to hear that again, and I haven't thought about that in probably 25 years. And you definitely have a mission out there. I was thinking I want to get you in front of some teacher groups and remind them I don't think they're doing that training anymore. And it's so critical with students and with us in our business. It was great. I'm definitely going to have this everywhere and remind myself to do it.
Yeah.
And I think
Any
I have a
refer?
10-second. I think I have a 10-second timer.
Well, it's good to be aware of it, right?
Yike timer.
The egg timer. Charlie, any referrals you can give me, I would love,
Absolutely.
because I'm on a bit of a crusade here. Did anybody hear anything new?
Yeah, actually I did.
Oh, yeah.
That when you
Good.
were talking about the questions, the way you ask questions as a journalist, you said that you ask why, or you try to bury why into the conversation. And I think if you talk to Matt or Rochelle, they'll probably say the same thing. When you talk to a client, that's the thing that the client is they're burying it themselves, right? So you keep asking open-ended questions. Eventually, you get to the why, like why, what is their need, and why did they come to you, asking for your support or the products that you sell. So I'm gonna. It made me very aware of that. That's what I'm doing. I got to bury the why question in the conversation, and it eventually comes up, and it'll make for a more productive conversation.
Yeah, I would say for Joe and Rochelle, what people are afraid of when they come to you, they're afraid that they haven't started saving early enough. They're, they're afraid it's going to cost them. So if you ask them anything near why did you wait so long, they're going to run away.
Mm.
Hayden,
Mm.
go ahead.
Well, I like your presentation. It was very good. It's very informative. I just want to add, one time I was working with someone that have store in Amazon, and he was didn't keep his mouth shut no matter what. He was non-stop talking. I use NLP, and I make him keep his mouth shut from that point on.
Sorry, you used what?
NLP.
He keep his mouth shut from this point. Just mean I give him some trick because it's a habit. When you keep all the time, it's a habit.
Right.
So I replace his habit. He keep his mouth shut, just like that.
You gave him NRP?
No,
NLP. I use
NLP.
NLP,
neuralistic programming.
neuro
Okay.
linguistic programming.
Okay. And how did that work?
And that's the reminder. I said remind him all the time when he go into meeting, he do this trick that I teach him how to do. And that's remind him all the time he need to keep his mouth shut. And from that point on, that's it. He keep his mouth shut. He was listening more than talk.
Craig, many years ago, NLP, linguistic programming, was a big thing. I mean, it probably still is today. I just haven't heard about it in the last so much as 40 years ago. And people would really actively listen to what you were saying, try and interpret it in some certain way, and then feed it back. But in those days, when it was like 40 years ago, the big problem was people that were doing it, they would listen to you, and then their brain would just, there'll be a gap of about 30 seconds while they're trying to process what you said before they respond to you. And it was, pretty chaotic at the time, because that was, I think, fairly new then, I think, at that time. But I just want to say quickly, it was an excellent presentation. Honestly, this is a fantastic subject. I never really thought about it as much, but it really is an incredible subject. You did such a great presentation.
Oh, thank you so much, Cliff.
Absolutely wonderful. Wonderful.
There's another thing I may say through body language. When people lean forward, they hear you talking. When people lean back, they listen. When they lean forward, they have something to say. They don't want to lose it, so they keep it. Now, the mind not going to let you to do two things in the same time. Either you listen or you hear. So when you have something to say, you keep it in your mind, you stop listening.
Karen?
Craig, get Karen in there too. She's been waiting.
First of all, it was wonderful, Craig. Thank you so much. It was really great. I have 4 pages of notes here. Yeah, so that was really great. You did remind me though of my job in advertising. A lot of it was problem solving. I was a troubleshooter, scheduler. So I had to really listen in order to know what was going on and what I had to schedule and what I had to do. And people used to come into my office to vent, so because I would listen to them. So
Yeah.
that was really great. But the main problem that I have, and I'm aware of it, so I try very hard not to do it, is not to interject. And to listen. But then by the time they're finished, they have said so many other things that I don't even feel that's important anymore. So I don't even bring it up. So that kind of bothers me, but I understand it, and I try to not to do it.
Well, everybody's a work in progress. I still talk too much and I still make mistakes, but I'm better at it than almost anybody that I know. I find that journalists are really good to talk to. I'll give you an example. When I was home recently, I picked up my brothers. I was with my brothers, and I said, somebody was killed at the end of our street last night. And I started talking about it, and my older brother said, listen, we got to stop it. He said, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we have to stop at this place on where we're going. And then my other brother jumped in with something else. And, suddenly no one was listening to my story. And I just let it go. I thought I'm not going to push it. One of the things that happens when you become a good listener is you realize how many bad listeners there are. And it can be frustrating, but you have to be understanding too. I heard somebody once say the biggest problem with going to therapy is dealing with all the people who've never gone to therapy. So it's a gift and a curse, but it's good in both cases. And I'll say something just between Karen and I know I am talking too much. Karen and I are friends, but I think, we love the Dave Berger kiss. Karen and I are friends, but one of the reasons I think Karen feels close to me is there was a day she was having a problem and it came up in our meeting and I stayed after and just listened to her. Right?
Right.
You just needed someone to hear you.
Yeah, you really helped me get through the day.
And that was just listening. Right? I gave some words of encouragement afterwards. But I think listening was most of it.
Oh, sure.
I-
I have a friend who's a therapist, and I don't know how she's a therapist because if I'm talking to her about something, she goes, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. So I feel like I have to talk faster. And so I'm talking faster, faster. She's going, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Makes me crazy. So I don't do that with her anymore.
But if I
Sometimes the
could add,
shoemaker's children have no shoes.
Craig, if I could add to what Karen said earlier, that is actually why I have a pen, because while I'm trying to listen, sometimes I can't because they're going on for a long period of time, right? And so I have to start taking notes so I can remember what I was gonna bring up in the midst of that conversation.
That's fine too. That's fine too.
Craig, I don't think we get a lot of opportunity to speak so much today. I mean, many, many years ago, we lived on Vancouver Island for a while and made friends with the First Nations people out there, really close friends there. And we did some wonderful things with them. And one of the things was with a very dear friend of ours, we'd go on, he took us up this sacred mountain, and the whole group of us. And everybody had a chance to speak, but they gave you a feather and you held that feather. And all the time that person was holding that feather, they speak as long as they want, whether it's 1 minute, some people are a minute, some people go on 10, 15 minutes. You didn't interrupt them. All the time they were holding that feather. And I felt like sometimes during the group, I'd like to take a feather out and give it to somebody and say, okay, everybody shut up. Let this one person speak with that feather until they're finished.
Yes, I was in a situation with some people, and I swore, I said, the next day, if we're in the same situation, I'm taking a spoon out of the drawer, and I'm going to say, you only get to talk when you hold the spoon. It didn't come to that, fortunately. But yeah, the indigenous eagle feather, it's an eagle feather. That's a great way of doing it when you're in these situations. Like if you're holding the feather, you get to talk. Charlie?
Yeah, I'd forgotten about we used to do that with our Girl Scout group. We actually had a feather, but it was a Texas hawk feather. And because the girls would, you know, they just were constantly talking over each other. And this is when they got older, when they were like 10 and 11, we were trying to get things done. But Craig, so much of what you have to say, it applies directly to business and personal. And I had just forgotten about so much of that. So many times we're offered this kind of information, and it's some of those things I think you need to hear it, over and over and over, because you walk away from it, or you outgrow it, or you don't think it's going to apply to a new situation. And I just can't thank you enough for lifting up how valuable that is. And especially when people really don't want you to solve anything, they just want you to listen. We've probably all heard somebody say, I don't want you to solve it for me. I just need you to listen to me. And that's so important.
Yes. I'm going to tell you a story about a time I didn't listen. I'm going to tell you another story about when I did. My favorite job was at a company called High Fidelity HD TV. We're actually having a reunion April 10th that I organized. And I had a great boss, and they sold the company to another company, which had a very different corporate atmosphere, which was not in line with my own. Anyway, it went very badly for me. A lot of my authority was taken away. They gave it to their new people. I was really unhappy. I felt like I was getting beat up on all the time. Somebody got promoted and they assigned their team to me. So now I had this team, but I was feeling really down and unappreciated. And I thought this team was under siege a little bit. My boss wanted to fire them all. And so I was trying to improve their work and their workflow and all of those things. And there was one woman who thought she was done work, but I thought some things could be improved. So I liked her a lot, but she was frustrated by some things. And she came in to talk to me. And I'm sitting at my desk and she's standing over me. And a dynamic to part of this that I hadn't considered at the time is I'm an old white guy and she's a younger Black woman. I wish I had considered that dynamic at the time, but I was very much inside of how I was feeling. So I listened to her, and then I started to talk, and she interrupted me. And I let it go once, and then I went to talk again. She interrupted me, and she's leaning over. She's almost yelling at me. And I said, all right, you've talked. Now it's my turn to talk, and you're going to stop talking until I'm done, and then you can talk. And she shut down and I never got her back. And she left for another job. I called her in the next day. I tried to work it out. I couldn't do it because what she really needed at that time was someone to listen to her. And what I was trying to do was think about myself and what I needed to be at that time. And it was a mistake. And I have always regretted that mistake. I could never get her back on board. And she's an executive now out there. She's doing great. But that was very clearly my mistake as a manager. As a leader, I didn't give her what she needed. I didn't give her the support she needed. Right? There are people who listen to that story and go, well, you were very justified. I have found that I have regretted many things that I was justified in doing, but I have never regretted being kind. That was a failure on my part. Big fat F, and I'm never going to get it back. I'll give you another listening one. As anybody who was following me on social media or was in Bang yesterday knows, my father passed away on March 23rd. The Sunday before I was up in Thunder Bay, because I didn't think he'd make it through the year. I was up there visiting him. And on the Sunday, he had chest pains and we had to take him into the hospital. So we're stuck. They were going to admit him into a room, but we're stuck in emergency. We're in a little curtained off area. It's just him and me. We're sitting there. You'd think it would be a bad situation, but I also realized that it's just me and my dad. And there's nothing else going on here except me and my dad. So I asked him, when were you happiest? And he told me he was happiest when he was with his boys. He remembered a time when I'm the middle child. He remembered a time when my oldest brother was sitting in his lap in the rocking chair and I came up and said, I want to rock too. So he held us both in his lap and he was rocking both of us. And I said, when were you saddest? And he said, when you guys were sick. There was a time when my younger brother was having seizures. He talked about that, how worried he was. My dad was a fisheries research scientist. Asked him, who taught you how to fish? Talked about his dad taking him out there, and it was like the 1930s. So they were, fishing to supplement their food, right? And my dad was an outdoorsman. Who taught you how to hunt? And he said it was a World War I sniper who taught him how to hunt, he and his friend. And he said, we used to go off into the bush with our 22 to shoot grouse. I said, how old were you? He said, I was between like 5 and 9 years old. I said, you and your friend are going off into the bush with guns and you're not even 10 years old yet? He said, yeah, well, we were well trained. I said, kids that age make bad decisions. He said, well, we were well trained. I'm actually worried about your brother. My older brother is now living up in Thunder Bay and he's got a place out in the bush and he's got some firearms. I'm worried about your brother. He's worried about my brother who's 65, but he's not worried about himself being between, under 10 years old running around with a 22. And that time was really special to me to just listen to my dad. And, he was gone a week later. So professional benefits, even bigger personal benefits.
And you left the room speechless. So,
does anybody have any questions or personal situations or professional situations they'd like to ask about?
Craig, before you do that, let's do this. Let's wrap up the video and then we'll open for questions.
Sure.
So if you guys have questions that you don't want to be recorded, the time is going to be in 30 seconds. You'll be able to ask that. Maybe give me your contact information and whatever else you want to give us to put on the tail end of this video. Go ahead, Craig.
Does anybody have any situations they want to talk about? Any questions they want to ask? Or do people have situations they want to share?
I could share one insight if you like. It was about
Please.
that situation where you said about the young lady and then, she left. The funny thing is, when you lived a long time, even if you haven't lived a long time, if you're just aware while you're younger, but as I've lived a very long time, you think back of those situations when you may have given that young woman one of the best gifts of her life. You may not realize it yourself at the time because you feel bad about it, but often we don't move on our lives until somebody gives us a bloody good kick up the arse. And I know that in my own life. There's been times when I probably wouldn't have moved out of it, but then we got fired or something happened or everything lost everything. And if that hadn't happened, I've been so lucky. But I've only been really lucky when something like that has happened and kicked me out of where I was and moved into the next position. Otherwise, I might have stayed there and my life would have been nowhere near as good as it is today.
Yeah, some of the best things have happened to me in my life when I didn't get what I wanted. And you had to think and reevaluate and do something else. That's wisdom, Cliff. That is wisdom right there.
Yeah.